So I thought it'd be kind of neat to have the gubernatorial candidates in here to Bedford to talk to us, and a good chance for those of you who don't get to meet them in person to get to meet them here and hear what they have to say. So we're kicking off with a great young candidate who's already making a mark for himself here in the state, and that's Kevin Smith. And I'll tell you a little bit about him, and then we're going to go right to him so he can get as much in this time period as he can. While he was still in college, Kevin actually served in the New Hampshire House of Representatives representing the town of Londonderry. And after college, he went on right away into a great job working for U.S. Senator Bob Smith, part of his staff, and he did both citizen caseworking issues as well as being the liaison for Senator Smith to both law enforcement and the public safety community here in Bedford. Then he went to the State House, and he was part of Governor Craig Benson's staff for 2 years, and among his duties there was that he was liaison to the executive branch department heads as well as the governor's liaison to the Governor's Council. In 2005, he was appointed to the New Hampshire Division for Juvenile Justice Services, was highly recognized for his work there, and was assistant director. And then in 2008 and until 2011, he served as executive director of Cornerstone Action. To jog your memory, that is a nonpartisan conservative advocacy group here in New Hampshire, very well known for working on issues of free market, limited government, and personal responsibility. As I said, till 2011, and then he became president of Smith Enterprises, which is a government and public relations consulting firm, and has been widely recognized, as I said, throughout the state for his efforts. In fact, he was named by Business New Hampshire magazine as one of the 10 most influential people here in New Hampshire. So now he's running for governor. His first time run for public office, other than back when he was just almost a kid, for state rep. He resides in Litchfield with his wife and 3 children. And I am going to go right to Kevin. Kevin, thank you so much for being here.
Kathy, thanks for having me, and I look forward to telling it like it is on your show
All
today.
Right, that's what we like.
Yeah.
That's what we like.
We need a governor who's going to tell it straight and not tell the people what they want to hear, but who's going to put out their vision, their plan to make this state a better state in terms of bringing more jobs here, more economic development, and making it the best state in the country to both live and work in.
Well, I have heard you say that your whole guiding philosophy is that government can create jobs, but government can foster a friendly business environment.
Yeah.
And I do know from the news that last week you announced a 4-part economic plan.
Right.
So why don't you get right into that?
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, I am the first candidate to put out a specific plan for how we're really going to attract good, sustainable, high-paying jobs to the state. And last week, it's a 4-part plan. Last week we put out part 1.
Okay.
And part of that plan has to do with our corporate tax rate, specifically lowering our corporate tax rate. If you look at all the different groups that rate the states on their taxes, the Tax Foundation took a look at New Hampshire. We have the 46, or 46 in the country in terms of our corporate tax rate, 46 being towards the higher end. So 50 being the highest, we're 46. We have very high corporate taxes in this state, and that's a disincentive for companies looking to grow here, stay here, or even move to the state of New Hampshire. We're 49th per capita in the country right now on the amount of people that commute out of state every day to go to work. I'm sure there's many folks right here in the town of Bedford that get on the highway every day and they're going down Route 3, 95, whatever, to go to work. We have too many of our citizens that have to go to Massachusetts to find a good, high-paying job, and we need to bring those jobs to New Hampshire. But the only way we're going to do that is if we have a very favorable business environment. And one of our impediments right now is our corporate tax rate. We have a business profits tax. It's 8.5%. We have a business enterprise tax. It's a tax on payroll that every business pays if they're not paying the business profits tax, including companies that aren't making a profit right now. And it's a disincentive for folks to start a company too, because if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about starting a business in New Hampshire, you're looking at all of those risk variables that go into doing that. And if you're looking at, okay, I'm not going to make money for the first few years, as many new businesses don't, but I'm going to be paying taxes to the state of New Hampshire regardless on it, that's a disincentive. So what I've proposed, and you can find my plan, it's on my website, kevinsmithforgovernor.com. It's called New Hampshire.
Good job.
Thank you. Well, I'd hear it from my staff if I didn't get that in. But it's called New Hampshire's Future is Now. And you can go on and look at it. I've proposed lowering our business profits tax to 5% by the year 2020, lowering the business enterprise tax from its current rate of 0.75% to 0.25% by the year 2020, and then completely exempting businesses that are doing less than $500,000 in gross revenue but aren't making a profit, exempting them from having to pay that business enterprise tax, because I don't think we ought to be taxing businesses, small businesses that aren't making a profit in this state. So that's one part of the plan. And then the other part to that piece is streamlining state government. And the reason why I put these pieces out together is because inevitably the first question I'm going to get is, well, Kevin, how are you going to make up for the loss of revenue? And I'll address that in two areas. One is that if you start to implement the proposals I've come up with, we're roughly talking about 3% of the state budget in the first year. It's about $6 million. So it's not a huge chunk of revenue. But a lot of that can be made up through streamlining a lot of processes in state government. There was an efficiency commission that was set up in 2003 that looked at all different areas across state government to find out where we could operate more efficiently as a state. And hardly any of their recommendations were implemented after this committee studied this for a long time. In fact, they found...
Good book on the bookshelf, though.
Great book on the bookshelf that I've taken back off the bookshelf because we ought to be doing a lot of these things, like consolidating state agencies. To me, there's no reason why we couldn't consolidate the banking, insurance, and securities departments, make them into one financial services department, and consolidate a lot of their responsibilities. But this committee found that in the first year alone, if you were to implement most of the recommendations, you could save $7 million right in that first year.
Wow.
Over 5 years, it was $420 million, and that's in 2003 dollars. So it would be even more today.
Now.
But you streamline state government. You also make it more accountable and more transparent. One of the things I did when I worked for the state is I developed a system of metrics in the department I worked in to measure the efficacy of state funds. To me, if you're funding programs in state government, we ought to be measuring how well they're working. And we should have a dashboard across all departments to say, okay, this is what the money's going towards, here's who it's servicing, and here's the outcomes of those services. In my world, it was juvenile justice. I wanted to know how many kids are we serving in the juvenile justice system that we're rehabilitating, they leave the system, and then they end up coming back. Because if they are, to me, that's saying something about, well, maybe your services aren't working very well. But we weren't even measuring that. And so when I went there, we implemented a system of metrics where for the first time we were measuring these programs. But I, as governor, would work with my commissioners to come up with these metrics across all of the state departments. So,
excuse me, so this could be done by you. It would not require legislative action, correct?
No, it wouldn't. I mean, when we did it in our department, we weren't even told to do it. I just said, this seems like a natural thing that you would want to do. I mean, why wouldn't you want to measure
return on investment?
The return on investment of state programs? To me, this is where you become a better manager or a better employee, is so that you can know where the areas are that are working and that are not working. It's not done to punish anyone. It's not done to say, oh, someone's not doing their job in this area. It's just to better your job, as I said, as a manager or as an employee. And to me, this makes for a great, smart budgeting as well, because whenever the legislature... I have found, being both on the legislative side, having served in the legislature, but also having been on the executive branch side as well, there's a big disconnect between when the legislature is putting together their budget and really what goes on in the state agencies.
You're right.
And to me, it would be great if the agency heads, when they're going in and presenting their budgets to the legislature, that they could say, here's our dashboard of metrics. Here are the programs we're funding, and these are the outcomes of those programs. So that the legislature isn't just fly by night making cuts wherever they think they want to make cuts to. They should be making cuts in those areas that are not working or that need to be reformed, or where there's redundancies. So to me, it just makes complete sense to do that. And as I said, as governor, I'd have the ability to do that in my departments. But I released those two parts together, the streamlining state government and lowering the corporate tax rate, because I do think they go hand in hand in those first few years. But here's the thing. I have no doubt that as we start to develop a more business-friendly environment here in the state, by reducing onerous business regulations, reducing our corporate tax rate. One, it's going to cause businesses that are already here to start growing more. They're going to create more jobs because guess what? They're paying less in taxes. And we're going to be a more attractive state for us to aggressively pursue companies from outside of New Hampshire to move into this state. You know, I've said oftentimes on the stump, I want to be I will be Deval Patrick's worst nightmare.
I was just going to ask you about that. I've heard you say that.
Well, it's true because, I mean, I will aggressively go into Massachusetts, where a lot of our citizens are right now, and talk to CEOs every week and say, hey, have you thought about doing business in New Hampshire? Why or why not? And this is what we're doing in our state to make it a more friendly environment for businesses to move here. What can we do to help bring your business to the state of New Hampshire? And talking to them to do that. And so what's going to happen over time, Kathy, is our economic base is going to expand. We're going to have a more expansive base of companies that are paying these taxes, and revenues are going to go up. It's exactly what happened in New York City when Mayor Giuliani became mayor there. He cut the corporate tax rate. Everyone said, oh, how are you going to make up for revenues? Well, guess what? Revenues went up on the corporate end because more companies moved into the city once it became more advantageous for them to do that. And so more of them were paying taxes, so revenues went up. That's exactly what would happen here in the state of New Hampshire, have no doubt.
Now, one of the things that kind of ties into all that, and I know that it's of interest to you, is the whole state regulatory system.
Yeah.
And sometimes the regulations are very onerous to businesses. And I did hear you the other night speak about something I thought was fascinating and that you might want to get across as an example, and that's the Red Hook Brewery over in Portsmouth.
It's a great story. I mean, so we got Red Hook Brewery, which is in Portsmouth. It's over at the Pease Air Force Base. And they're our second largest brewery in the state, only behind Anheuser-Busch. And they do a lot of what's called the craft beer industry, and they do certain flavors of beer. But we have these statutes on the books right now. And this is a microcosm for how business regulations are in the state of New Hampshire. We're not very friendly to a lot of small businesses. But there's these regulations on the books that have been there forever. No one knows why they're still there. But essentially what it is it's not allowing Red Hook to brew certain flavors of beer here in the state. Even though they're sold here, they're not allowed to be brewed here.
Which is so bizarre.
Very bizarre. So we're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars of business because they are essentially producing the beer in Washington State, and then they ship it to Massachusetts, where it's being held in refrigerated warehouses that they lease from the state of Massachusetts.
From the state, even?
Yeah. Oh, well, no, I'm sorry. That they're leasing them in the state of Massachusetts. Okay. So they're doing business in Washington, they're doing business in Massachusetts, but then they're selling this beer in New Hampshire.
Trucking it up here to sell.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Very well, you know, as I've often said, common sense and government don't always go together on the same line, but we've got to bring more common sense into how governments run. But the fact of the matter is that the Portsmouth Brewery, I mean, for Red Hook, it's their largest distribution center for the entire East Coast. And they want to be doing their business, all of their business in the state of New Hampshire, but they can't right now because of these regulations. And this is where a governor has to work with the legislature, because a governor can't just wave a magic wand and say, we're going to do away with these regulations. But you work with the legislature, you find someone to file this legislation that says, you know what? We're going to get rid of these regulations because they make no sense. They're not helping anyone. Even liquor enforcement couldn't say why these laws were on the books. But you get rid of them and allow Red Hook to do that. Let me tell you, that is an impressive facility that they have.
And that has to mean a fair amount of jobs.
Oh, it does.
That could be here that are instead in Washington and Massachusetts.
Exactly. Oh, it is. It is. It's more jobs. It's more tax revenue. I mean, because the more business they're doing here, the more revenue we're going to get from that. And so, we have to look at a lot of these regulations that are going on in the state right now.